Dawson's Rambles.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here, coming at you with some Power Rangers related news. Now this news came out like a day and a half ago, so I'm a little bit late. I wanted to have this video come out yesterday, but unfortunately I got kind of busy yesterday, so I'm sorry I'm a little late on it. But if you didn't hear, there was news surrounding Hasbro. They have sold eOne to Lionsgate, eOne being the facilitators of like their brands for TV shows and stuff like that, for entertainment. You know, I'm sure you've heard before, if you pay attention to the Power Rangers news, they've talked about before that eOne was going to be handling the reboot. So like the reboot show was going to be produced under eOne, and they had their showrunner, the Klein lady, and like Entwistle as like employed under that, and that was kind of the umbrella in which it was going to be built. And now it's, you know, sold to Lionsgate. So what does that mean for Power Rangers? I mean, it could mean a lot of different things. It's honestly all kind of confusing in a lot of ways, and we don't really know. It doesn't help that we only have really base level information even before this. There's a couple just different fun things I wanted to talk about and just speculation. Number one, of course, if you don't recognize the name Lionsgate, it's the words lion and gate together. No, but what it is, you know, obviously you probably know that Lionsgate was the one that produced the Power Rangers 2017 movie that happened before. So some people were saying, both jokingly and seriously, like, oh, maybe we'll get to see a 2017 continuation. You know, I would honestly, personally love that. I think it's unlikely, which I'll talk about here in a second, but in my dream world, I loved the 2017 movie, and if that was somehow a possibility, that's honestly what I would like to see. Like, in terms of ranking things I would want to see out of the franchise is build the reboot and new continuity from 2017, and then just a reboot, maybe something animated, and then I guess crawling back to the show that we know it. But that, I loved it, and I think there was so much potential for it. I think it had such a great take on the mythology, a lot of heart, great cast. I think that would be awesome. Again, this is just personally, I'm not saying I think it's likely, I'm just saying if I somehow had a choice, I would totally do that. However, I do think it's probably unlikely. I'll never say never though, as I've mentioned countless times in various videos talking about Power Rangers news. Power Rangers has surprised us on multiple times. I mean, not the least of which, you know, it's almost memeable the amount of times Power Rangers has been canceled and then come back from the dead. It's died more times than the Winchesters almost. No, that's exaggeration. You know what I mean though. And then, you know, I'm still sometimes surprised, especially given the state we're in now, but that Hasbro even bought Power Rangers. I mean, I was surprised when Saban bought it back, honestly. Like, when Power Rangers was winding down at Disney, I didn't even know Saban really existed. Like, after they sold it to Disney, they just fell off my radar completely. I mean, I knew that, like, Saban the person existed, but I just kind of assumed that they disbanded. To be fair, I wasn't keeping up with, like, corporate news or anything. I like how they said they disbanded, like they're a weird criminal organization. Well, point is like, that was two huge things. Like, I never expected Saban to buy it back, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so great, they're gonna bring it back to the glory days. Then I was surprised by what they did with it. I was surprised Hasbro brought it back. Hell, I was surprised, still am surprised by just the approach of Cosmic Fury and stuff like that. So, it's not like there hasn't been some out of left field stuff, so I'm never gonna say never. I would say it's probably more like a 5% chance, so I wouldn't close it off completely, but I just find it unlikely. I mean, of course, people in the comments, I can already, like, pre-see the comments, but of course they're not going to do it. It flopped. I mean, yeah, it didn't do that great. I wouldn't say it was one of the most disastrous flops I've ever seen. And from what I understand, it did pretty decently, like on home release and stuff like that. And honestly, it had pretty good reception in regards to the casual audience. Like, I didn't do a census or anything like that, and I didn't go speak to everybody, but from what I've seen, you know, I would say the people I've spoke to, but I hate when people say that because they're like, well, me and my 5 friends like this, so obviously it'll be successful. But from my general, you know, general feeling of, you know, like every now and then when I go watch the trailer again, like, or want to see a clip from it, sometimes I'll scroll down to the comments, and like 80 to 90% of the comments I see, which are, I'm perceiving from, especially based on context, casual fans, they really seem to like it. Hell, it's actually kind of funny, recently, within the last few months, a bunch of random, like, YouTubers I watch for, like, movie and TV news reviews, whatever, have mentioned it just offhand, like, and they're always, like, positive. It's always something like, oh, that was a really good movie, I'm surprised it didn't continue, or I'm disappointed it didn't continue. Like, there was one I was watching recently where someone was asking a question about, like, the Hasbro stuff, because of, like, Transformers or whatever in a live stream, and he's like, oh yeah, they're supposed to be doing a Power Rangers reboot, it's a shame they couldn't do the, like, so like, I think the general public liked it. Honestly, I'm sure there's people from the general public that didn't like it, but I'm just saying that most of the negativity I saw was from purist fans and people that were like, oh, this movie has too much character work and depth, they need more bright colors and explosions. I'm just saying, I feel like it had a pretty good general perception, even though it didn't do the greatest. I think there's various reasons for that. I honestly think that that came down more to the marketing and presentation and the placement of it. I'm not saying, like, I know that for sure, but I feel like if they would have done better marketing I mean, this is a totally different situation, but we're seeing right now how much of a great effect the marketing for Barbie did for that movie. I think it would have done pretty good regardless, and it's a totally different situation, but I'm just saying I think its marketing gave it a push. Now, I never would have expected Power Rangers 2017 to get that level of marketing, but my point is there's an importance in marketing, and I think if it had marketed better and placed better, I think it could have done solid enough to be on more solid footing than it was. I think that, like, the fans get in their own perspective and they're like, well, obviously it didn't do well because it wasn't tokusatsu enough, or it didn't do well because it didn't have a morph sequence. Like, the casual audience is going to have no way of knowing, like, going into the movie, like, well, this didn't have a morph sequence, I'm not going to get a ticket. That's not what happens. Not to mention they probably don't care. My long-winded point is, I feel like the general audience perception of that movie was actually pretty solid. And, like, the discussion about this kind of got me thinking about the general public's perception of PR, thinking about the reaction from casual fans. And by casual fans, I mean people that grew up with PR like we did, but they didn't hold on to it past, when they grew out of it. And they'll see something like Once and Always and, like, laugh at it and make fun of it and be like, oh, it's just as lame as it always was. But 2017 kind of did that thing for a lot of people that I was hoping that showed, like, oh, hey, this concept can be something cool. Not saying it did that for everyone, I'm just saying the public perception was pretty good. So I think if circumstances were different, it would be good ground to stand on. However, again, I find it extraordinarily unlikely. Not because of the quality of the movie even so much, or not even necessarily because it bombed, but because I actually just recently, I didn't know that according to Jinsaku, they actually, when Hasbro bought it, apparently wanted to continue the reboot series. But Lionsgate owns the rights, which brings up the discussion now, because now that Lionsgate and Hasbro can work together on this, it brings the rights back into play. So apparently they did want to continue it in some form. So but my point with that is that I'm not saying it's unlikely necessarily because of the version of it in terms of the story or the reception. I think just too much time has passed with the cast and everything, and it would be kind of hard to get the band back together. I don't think any of the cast that I know of was, like, embarrassed by it or anything, but, they've probably moved on. Especially a lot of them have moved on to pretty big things, and they probably wouldn't want to go back to something like that. So I think that there's just a lot of uphill battles you would face in trying to bring it back. So I find that extraordinarily unlikely, as much as I would want it. Just as a side note, something I would love to see happen, I don't know the logistics of it in regards to this aspect, but now that we are in a relationship where we might have access to the 2017 versions, I would love for us to be able to get a comic for it. I think this explains why I was wondering why in Shattered Grid, I'm like, why didn't they just have the 2017 ones there? And, like, they showed everyone, I think that's why. Kind of like I think there's some weird rights stuff with the movie, the original movie. Anyway, my point is I think that would be cool. Just like we just got a Hyperforce comic, I think it would be cool to get a one-off or a mini-series continuing it, because they had plans for like 5 or 6 movies, and I would love to see a comic. At the very least, can we leak what those plans were? I'm curious as hell. Anyway, that's the talk about the 2017 movie. In regards to what this means for the future, it's kind of uncertain. As of right now, all we know is they just keep saying the reboot's on the way, but with nothing concrete because we haven't been shown anything, and, obviously there's been a bunch of roadblocks right now, of course, being the writers and actors strike, so even if they wanted to or they were ready, they can't do anything right now. In regards to, like, how this Lionsgate thing will affect it, I mean, obviously, if they continue to use eOne, they will now be dealing with Lionsgate, and they're going to be able to work with them because they just announced, like, they're going to be working on Hasbro and Lionsgate are working on Monopoly movies. So, presuming they would still work with eOne, it would be some sort of a partnership with Lionsgate, meaning Lionsgate would be involved in the reboot. Again, I don't think that means 2017 is going to come back. I would love it, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think, again, there's a lot up in the air right now. It's a very unclear time. I would say there's roughly 3 options I'm thinking are going to happen. Number 1, things are basically just going to move forward like they say. They keep saying the reboot's on the way, which I think this is definitely one of those cases where it seems more, like, less likely the farther we get into it because, we just haven't seen anything, but also fans can be a little bit entitled, like, well, we didn't hear anything, I want to hear it now, and so maybe it is just going to be on track, and, after the strike clears up and everything, they might go on track. It's obviously going to be delayed because of the strike, but it might just actually be what they say, and they're still working on it, and it just rolls out. Number 2 is it still rolls out after the strike and stuff, but things change due to this Lionsgate thing. Maybe there's some slight restructuring to the approach, so meaning that it would still be an active development, but there might be further delays because they might change approach or how it's produced. Then maybe they don't even work with eOne and Lionsgate. Maybe they have to license it to somebody else. So basically the idea is, number 1 being everything goes as planned, but with just Lionsgate at the helm. Number 2 is things change because of the Lionsgate situation. Number 3, it's possible that, I'm still 100% confident we will get a reboot. It's just a matter of when. Number 3 is they just kind of shelve it indefinitely, meaning, there would eventually be a reboot, but in regards to what they've been working on right now, behind the scenes, they kind of shelve it as not a priority as there's so much else going on, and they pick it up down the road. Could be 5 years, 10 years, maybe less. But I'm just saying, that honestly seems kind of likely to me sometimes. I wouldn't be totally surprised just because there's been so many change in leaderships and so many different roadblocks. Like I've said in the past, like, oh, I think the reboot's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. It could be in 2 years, it could be in 10 years. Like I don't see this being, if Power Rangers peters out now, I don't think Power Rangers is going to go away forever. It just probably could take a longer break than we're thinking. It's really interesting, and it's kind of unfortunate because I think it's a combination of some fumblings behind the scenes, but also outside circumstances of the change in leadership and, obviously world situation stuff like the pandemic and then the writer's strike and all that type of stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that Hasbro isn't at fault for fumbling certain things, but I think for the most part I see a lot of fans tend to paint it with the brush of Hasbro's a villain doing all this. It's like, well, yeah, there's been screwing up some stuff, but also there's been so many behind-the-scenes politics and situation. It's interesting, but this is certainly an interesting development. It could also mean something positive, that maybe there'd be more motivation from Lionsgate and Hasbro to get something working together, but we'll have to see. But what do you guys think of the situation? If it was remotely possible, would you want to see the 2017 version return? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.